Did you know that some of the most iconic D&D adventures, like Out of the Abyss, follow the same storytelling structure used in the Odyssey, Alice in Wonderland, and even The Hobbit? It's called the Voyage and Return, and today I'll show you how this classic plot can make your D&D campaign unforgettable. I'm Josh, the Creator Bard. Welcome back to the Tavern, where we tell the best stories together. Storytelling is at the heart of every D&D campaign, and whether you know it or not, most adventures follow one of the 7 basic plots, a framework identified by Christopher Booker in the 7 Basic Plots: Why We Tell Stories. Today we are diving into the Voyage and Return, a plot that takes characters away from the familiar and throws them into the unknown, a place where danger, transformation, and triumph await.
I'm going on an adventure!
From exploring cursed jungles to escaping alternate dimensions to waking up as a prisoner in the Underdark, this plot structure is perfect for creating adventures your players will never forget. But how do we make a Voyage and Return story work for D&D? Let's break it down. First, we'll ask what is Voyage and Return, then we'll talk a little bit about its structure, and finally, we'll wrap it up with how you can apply it in your D&D games. So what is a Voyage and Return? At its core, a Voyage and Return plot challenges your players to leave the familiar world behind and venture into places filled with uncertainty, danger, and wonder. But DMs face a challenge here. First, the journey needs a purpose. Why are the players leaving? Is it to retrieve an artifact, explore a new realm, or escape a growing threat? Or, as in Out of the Abyss, do the players just wake up as prisoners in the Underdark or on a ship? Is the reason for their journey hidden from their view? Do they have their memories? Do they know why they're heading there? Regardless of whether they know or not, you should know. Give your journey a purpose. Next, the unknown must feel unfamiliar. The destination should challenge everything that the characters rely on, rules, cultures, or even reality itself. What if there's a forest that's cursed by a hag that lives there to recount the same events every day that the players are there? What if there is a culture where there are practices so heinous and barbaric that the players can't fathom what brought them here in the first place? What if you even begin tweaking the mechanics just a little bit to fit certain points of that world, where some spells might be more powerful, less powerful, some effects may not even work? And finally, change is at the heart of a Voyage and Return. Players shouldn't return in the same state that they left. Coming back isn't just about finding the way home. It's about surviving the trials and bringing something back with them they did not have before. I don't mean a relic, I don't mean treasure, I mean a state of mind. They should be fundamentally different from the state they were in when they first started. For example, imagine a village cursed by a spreading darkness. The party ventures deep into the Shadowfell, a land of whispers and despair, to find its source. But what happens when the land itself begins to change them? What things can they learn from the Shadowfell? What can they take from it that makes them different from where they started? So those are some core things kind of at the heart of a Voyage and Return. But now let's move on to the actual structure. Like, what are the plot elements that occur in a Voyage and Return story? There are 5 of them. The first is the anticipation stage and fall into the other world. This stage is where the hero or heroine is, maybe they start out a bit naive or inexperienced. Maybe they're bored or reckless, but the state where they're at leaves them open to new experiences and world-shattering realizations. I think one of the most iconic examples of this is Alice in Wonderland, and we'll kind of use that throughout to describe what these elements are and how they're utilized. Alice is a young girl falling down the rabbit hole. She was naive and she was sheltered, but she was curious enough to chase a rabbit, even falling down its own hole into this other world, and that is where her Voyage and Return begins. And after that kind of anticipation in the chase scene, and then the falling into the new world down the rabbit hole, she experiences the second plot element, the initial fascination or dream stage. Here's where the world poses interesting new things to explore that are puzzling and intriguing to the characters. Alice's unpredictable size change, talking animals and objects that she'd never really encountered before, illogical events and conversations like the Cheshire Cat and his disappearing act, the Mad Hatter's tea party, all of these things that at first kind of delight her and are these interesting, intriguing things for her to explore. And she is initially fascinated. This is a dream to her, pulling her out of the mundane and into a fantastical world. But it doesn't last for that long. Next comes the frustration stage. But before we get into that, guys, if you are enjoying this take on the Voyage and Return plot, if you're finding this video helpful or entertaining, remember to give me some bardic inspiration by hitting the like button, and subscribe to make sure that you hear the trumpets every time the bard comes to the stage. Now we do have the frustration stage. This is the turning point of the story, where the hero or heroine becomes frustrated. Perhaps the world is just too different for them to really be able to enjoy it. Perhaps it's more dangerous than at first anticipated. In this stage, a shadow begins to intrude on the characters. It becomes increasingly alarming. Here the characters might face unique monsters, traps, puzzles, and other hazards that are very specific to the otherness of this setting. In Alice's case, she begins to become frustrated with the illogical nature of Wonderland. And not only this, there is a shadow that begins to intrude on her journey. And this takes the form of the Red Queen.
Swing.
This is also a place where characters might experience things like moral dilemmas, what they're willing to sacrifice to keep moving forward. And as this frustration keeps growing and growing, we're familiar with this kind of structure already, it brings up the nightmare stage. The nightmare stage is when the shadow has become so intrusive that the hero or heroine's well-being is at serious risk. Will they be able to come out of this? This is the final test that pushes the characters to their limits. This is where the characters transform. Whether by discovering new strengths or facing their greatest fears, something happens in them that causes them to be fundamentally different from where they started. Perhaps they've learned something about the world. Perhaps they've learned something about themselves. Perhaps all of the above. This is where transformation happens. And this is where they most need to escape. And that does bring up the fifth and final point of the Voyage and Return plot, the thrilling escape and return. When the shadow is at its most dangerous, its most intruding, and its most dominating, the hero or heroine escapes. They escape not only from the danger of the shadow, but from the world itself. But coming home isn't about where they were, it's about who they've become. The character's return changed, bringing a boon, a curse, a new, hard-earned truth. Whatever the case, they have changed from who they were. And that is what this return is about, coming back and coming into their own. They return home, they return to the same place, but they return with new insights, they return with a new understanding of how things work or how they themselves want to be. And that newly born person is one that is able to navigate the home they returned to only because they learned from what they had to go through in the other world. Now, as I said, we've explored the structure of the Voyage and Return plot. Let's talk about how you can use this in your games. This framework is incredibly flexible and works in nearly every setting. Whether you're running high epic fantasy, a gritty urban campaign, or even a sci-fi adventure, this story works. That's the great thing about plots, is that they are not beholden to a specific setting or genre. At its core, the Voyage and Return is about transformation. It's not just about leaving and coming back, it's about how the journey changes the characters. To make it work in your game, focus on these three key aspects. Create a world that feels alien. This plot does lean pretty heavily on the exploration pillar of D&D and world building aspects of any ttrpg. So when you're going to plan out a Voyage and Return, make sure that you keep in mind that this is something that needs to be done. A rich and vibrant world does need to be created, and it needs to feel entirely unfamiliar to what the players have experienced thus far. The unknown should challenge the players' expectations and force them to adapt. For example, a cursed forest might distort time and space, or a distant colony might have been warped by an alien artifact. The environment itself becomes an antagonist. Keep that in mind. It's not just your BBEG fighting against these guys, it is the environment itself. 2. Design trials that test the player's resolve. We talked pretty in depth about trials in our video on The Quest. If you want more information on these trials, go ahead and watch that. I'll link it here somewhere. So I'm not going to spend too much time there, but just note that trials should test the player's resolve. They don't have to be combat, even though combat is a great example of a trial, especially for martial characters. Trials can include puzzles, moral dilemmas, survival challenges, but they should force the players to confront their character's flaws or ideals, creating meaningful growth. So for this, you're actually going to have to know your player characters, know what the characters are like, what they do, and how to push them toward growth. Because once again, this plot does focus on growth and change. When the party comes back, they should bring something with them, whether it's a knowledge, an insight, an artifact, or even a curse. Their return should affect the world around them and remind them that they're no longer the same people who left. And GMs, feel free to narrate certain aspects of that change to remind the players where they came from, as well as the characters. The beauty of the Voyage and Return is that it challenges the player characters on every level: physical, emotional, and narrative. I've said it many times in this video, and I'm going to say it one last time. It is not about where they go, it's about who they become. The Voyage and Return plot is a staple of storytelling because it captures what every D&D campaign is about: transformation. By leaving the familiar, your players face danger, grow as heroes, and return with something more valuable than gold. But you should still give your players gold. It's fun and they like it a lot. As a DM using this plot, your job will be to create a world worth exploring and a journey worth remembering. The voyage will test them, the return will define them. Now let's hear your story. Have you ever experienced a Voyage and Return plot in a D&D campaign? Or maybe you've got a favorite piece of media that exhibits Voyage and Return really well. Go ahead and put that lore drop in the comments. I can't wait to hear from you. And if you want more storytelling tips to bring your D&D games to life, make sure to check out my other videos on the 7 basic plots and keep an eye out for the next one on the comedy. That's all for now, guys. Till next time, gotta roll.